Layla was a young maid who worked in a large, old house on the edge of the town. The house was beautiful, with tall windows, shiny floors, and many rooms that seemed to stretch forever. From the outside, it looked like a peaceful place, but inside, it had a quiet that sometimes felt strange to Layla. She had been working there for almost a year, and she knew the house well, every corner, every shadow. She liked her work, cleaning the rooms, arranging the furniture, and making sure everything was in perfect order. She took pride in her work, but there was something about that afternoon that made her feel uneasy from the moment she stepped inside. It was a hot summer day, and the sun shone brightly over the garden outside. Layla had just finished cleaning the kitchen, where the smell of fresh soap and lemon lingered in the air. She wiped her hands on her apron and looked around, noticing how quiet the house was. It was too quiet. Usually, there were footsteps from the master of the house, children laughing, the soft music coming from the sitting room. But today, there was only silence. The silence made her heart beat a little faster. She shook her head and told herself it was normal. Maybe the family had gone out, or maybe everyone was resting. Layla moved to the living room, picking up cushions and straightening the curtains. She loved this room because it had a big window that looked out onto the garden. Sunlight came in, making the room warm and bright. She smiled to herself as she adjusted the vase of flowers on the table. Everything looked perfect, just like she liked it. But still, there was that strange feeling in her stomach, a small worry she couldn't shake. As she dusted the shelves, Layla's thoughts wandered. She thought about her life, about why she had come to work here. She remembered how she had left her small village, leaving behind her family to earn money in the city. It was not easy at first. She had to learn many things: how to clean big houses, how to cook meals for so many people, how to obey instructions and stay out of trouble. But she was strong and determined, and over time, she became confident in her work. People often praised her, calling her honest and hardworking. She felt proud when she heard those words. But that afternoon, she didn't feel proud. She felt uneasy. Something in the air made her notice small details: the way the curtains moved slightly, even though the windows were closed; the way a picture on the wall seemed slightly tilted; the sound of a floorboard creaking in a part of the house where no one should be walking. She paused, her hand frozen on the duster. Layla's heart beat faster. "It's probably nothing," she whispered to herself, but the voice sounded small and unsure. She tried to focus on her work, telling herself to ignore the feeling. Layla moved to the hallway, sweeping and tidying as she went. She smiled at the memories that each room held. In one corner, there was a small desk with a lamp and notebooks that belonged to the young boy of the house. She remembered how he used to run around laughing, and she would chase him to clean up the mess. The house had always been lively, filled with warmth and laughter. But today, it felt empty, almost too quiet, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Layla stopped in the middle of the hallway and looked around. Shadows danced along the walls, long and strange shapes from the sunlight outside. She rubbed her eyes and blinked, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The house had never looked so alive and yet so empty at the same time. She shivered slightly, realizing that she was alone. The family had indeed gone out. The sound of the front gate closing in the distance confirmed it. She was the only person in the house. She told herself again, "It's okay, nothing will happen. Just finish your work and go home." But deep inside, a small voice of worry whispered that today was not like other days. She felt a little nervous, but she continued walking toward the living room, humming softly to herself to calm down. Layla picked up a small book she found on the sofa and flipped through the pages. It was a children's storybook she had found while cleaning before. She smiled faintly, remembering how the children laughed when she read stories to them. As she placed the book back, she noticed a movement in the corner of her eye. Layla turned quickly, but there was nothing there. Just the empty room, quiet and still. Her heart skipped a beat. "It's just my imagination," she said aloud, but her voice sounded shaky even to her own ears. She took a deep breath, straightened her back, and continued her work. Little did Leela know, this quiet and seemingly peaceful afternoon was about to change everything. Something was coming, something that would make her run, something that would test her courage in ways she had never imagined. But for now, she was unaware. She cleaned, dusted, and arranged the room, trying to ignore the small sense of fear building inside her. She did not yet know that the ordinary afternoon was about to turn into the most terrifying moment of her life. After finishing the living room, Leela moved carefully toward the upstairs rooms. She carried a small bucket of cleaning supplies in one hand and a cloth in the other. Her footsteps were soft on the polished wooden floor, but each creak sounded louder than usual in the quiet house. She paused halfway up the stairs, feeling a chill run down her spine. The sunlight streaming through the windows did not warm her as it usually did. Instead, it cast strange shadows on the walls, making the house feel different, almost alive in a way that made her uneasy. Leela tried to focus on her work. She reminded herself that the house was old, and old houses always made noises. She had worked here long enough to know the creaks and groans of the floorboards, but today, something was different. The noises didn't seem random. They felt deliberate, as if someone or something was moving around in the house while she worked. She stopped, listening carefully. For a moment, all she heard was the quiet rustle of her own breath. Then, faintly she heard it, a soft dragging sound, coming from the hallway upstairs. Her heart skipped a beat. Leela froze in place. She told herself it was probably just the wind. "Yes," she whispered, "just the wind moving something." But the sound continued, slow and steady, like someone dragging their feet across the floor. Leela gripped the cloth tightly, her knuckles white. She took a careful step forward, then another, moving slowly toward the hallway where the sound seemed to come from. Her mind raced with questions. Who could be in the house? How did they get in? And most importantly, why was no one else here to notice? When she reached the top of the stairs, she looked down the long hallway. The sunlight from the windows barely reached the corners, leaving dark shadows that seemed to stretch like fingers across the walls. Leela swallowed hard and tried to calm herself. She reminded herself that she was not alone. Her colleague from downstairs might come upstairs soon, or maybe the family could return at any moment. But then, she noticed something else. A door at the far end of the hall, which she knew was always closed, was slightly open. A thin line of darkness showed the room beyond. Her heart raced faster. That door had never been opened before, not without someone using it. Leela's mind flashed with memories of stories she had heard about strange things happening in big houses. She had always laughed them off before, but today she couldn't. Something was different. She felt a pull toward the door, a strange need to see what was inside. She took a slow step forward, then another, her heart pounding in her chest. The dragging sound had stopped, replaced by a faint whisper of movement. She could not tell if it was coming from the room or from behind her, but the feeling of being watched made her shiver. Just as she reached the end of the hallway, she heard a sudden sharp sound from downstairs, a loud thump, like something heavy hitting the floor. Leela jumped, her heart in her throat. She pressed herself against the wall, trying to make herself small and quiet. She could hear her own breathing, loud and uneven. The thump had come from the kitchen, she realized. Her mind raced. The kitchen was far from where she was now. Could someone really be inside the house? Her stomach tightened, and a cold fear ran through her body. Leela's instincts told her to run, but curiosity and responsibility kept her rooted to the spot. She knew the family trusted her to take care of the house. She could not simply hide and wait. She had to find out what was happening. Slowly, carefully, she moved toward the slightly open door. Her hand trembled as she reached for the handle. Before she could touch it, she heard another sound, this time a faint voice, almost a whisper. "Ma'am, please," the voice said, breaking through the silence. Leela froze. The voice was urgent, scared. It was a voice she recognized. It was one of her colleagues, the black maid who sometimes worked with her in the afternoons. Lila's heart leapt. She had to help. She moved quickly down the hall, her steps light and fast. She reached the top of the stairs and peered into the kitchen from above. Through the window above the sink, she saw her colleague pressed against the wall, her eyes wide with terror. Her hands shook as she whispered, "He's coming. Please help me." Lila's stomach twisted. Whoever he was dangerous. The fear in her colleague's eyes told her that this was not a joke or a small problem. This was real, and it was serious. Without thinking, Lila dropped her bucket and ran down the stairs 2 at a time. The kitchen seemed darker now, and every shadow looked threatening. She moved carefully but quickly, her mind focused only on helping her colleague. She could hear her own heart pounding as if it were shouting at her to be fast, to be careful, and to be brave. As she approached, she noticed small details that made her even more nervous. The back door was slightly open, letting in a thin line of light from the garden. Footprints were visible on the dusty floor, large, uneven, and hurried. Whoever had been here was still around, Lila realized. Her colleague's eyes met hers, full of desperation. "Quickly," she whispered. "He will be here any moment." Lila nodded, swallowing her fear. She reached out and grabbed her colleague's hand. Together, they moved toward a safe corner of the kitchen, far from the door. Lila whispered calming words, trying to keep both of them quiet and unnoticed. Every second felt long and dangerous. The tension in the house had grown so thick that it was almost like the walls themselves were holding their breath, waiting for something terrible to happen. For the first time, Lila realized that today's quiet house was not peaceful, it was dangerous. And the danger was closer than she could have imagined. She had to act fast, and she had to stay calm. Otherwise, everything could go wrong in a second. Layla held her colleague's hand tightly as they crouched in the corner of the kitchen. The sunlight from the back door barely lit the room, leaving shadows that seemed to creep across the floor. Every small sound, creaking floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, even the faint rustle of the curtains, made both of them flinch. Leela's mind raced, trying to think of what to do next. She had never felt fear like this before. Her colleague's trembling hand in hers told her this was serious, more serious than anything she had ever faced in the quiet house. "Ma'am, he's coming," her colleague whispered again, her voice barely audible. She looked over her shoulder, her eyes wide and desperate. Lila's stomach tightened. "Who is he?" she asked softly, careful not to let the fear in her voice show. Her colleague shook her head, too scared to speak. The urgency in her eyes, however, said more than words ever could. Whoever he was, they were dangerous, and they were close. Leela's mind flashed through every possible scenario. Could it be a thief? A stranger? Or could it be someone they knew? Her heart thumped loudly, almost echoing in the empty kitchen. She knew one thing for certain. They could not stay there. They had to move, to hide, or to find help. But the thought of leaving the kitchen, even for a second, made her nervous. Every shadow in the room seemed to move, as if it were alive, waiting to trap them. The black maid, Lila's colleague, took a deep breath and whispered quickly, He has done this before. He knows where we hide. Please, we must move." Her voice shook with fear. Lila nodded silently, understanding the gravity of the situation. The danger was not random, it was personal. Whoever he was, he had been here before, and he had intentions that were terrifying. Leela scanned the room for a safe place to hide. There was a small pantry at the corner of the kitchen. It was dark, cramped, and not very comfortable, but it could hide them. She motioned to her colleague, and together, they crawled toward it. Every step felt slow, every sound amplified in the silent house. Lila could feel her own heartbeat in her ears, thudding as if warning her to hurry. Her colleague followed closely, her hand gripping Lila's arm tightly. As they reached the pantry, Lila paused for a moment. She looked back at the kitchen, her eyes scanning for any movement. The shadows seemed darker now, and the quiet was too complete. It was as if the house itself had stopped breathing. Lila's instincts screamed that the danger was near. She pulled her colleague inside the pantry and closed the door as quietly as she could. They crouched together, barely daring to breathe. Inside the pantry, the black maid whispered more about the danger. He does not forgive," she said, her voice trembling. "Last time, he hurt someone, because they tried to run. We have to stay hidden. We cannot make a sound." Lila's hands tightened into fists. She felt a surge of protective anger. She would not let anyone get hurt on her watch. She had to stay calm, and she had to be smart. From the pantry, they could hear the faint creak of the back door opening wider. The sound was deliberate, slow, and chilling. Whoever it was, they were entering the house carefully, looking for something or someone. Lila's heart jumped. She leaned closer to her colleague and whispered, "Stay quiet. Whatever happens, do not make a sound. I promise I will protect you." Her colleague nodded, eyes wide with terror, and clutched Lila's arm. The noise in the house grew slightly louder. Footsteps moved along the kitchen floor, deliberate and careful. Lila held her breath. Every sound seemed to echo, each step a reminder of the danger just outside the pantry door. The fear in the room was almost tangible, pressing against them like a heavy cloth. Lila's mind raced, thinking of ways to keep them safe. She remembered that the house had many hidden corners, small rooms, and closets. Perhaps they could escape if the intruder entered the kitchen fully. Suddenly, there was a small crash plate falling in the living room. The sound was sharp, breaking the silence. Lila's stomach turned over. She held her colleague tightly, whispering, "It's okay. Stay calm. Stay calm." Her colleague's eyes were wide with panic, but Lila's presence gave her a small sense of comfort. Lila knew she had to act, but she could not yet see a safe path. Every move had to be perfect. One mistake could cost them dearly. The black maid whispered the terrifying reason why she ran. He wants revenge," she said softly. He blames people. He does not care who. He only wants to hurt." Lila's mind went blank for a moment. The words sank in slowly, chilling her to the bone. This was not a random attack. It was personal. Someone who wanted revenge was coming for them, and they had no idea what he might do. Lila squeezed her colleague's hand. Fear was there, yes, but determination rose alongside it. She had to stay calm. She had to be smart. They could not stay in the pantry forever, but for now, it was the safest place. The sound of footsteps grew louder, moving closer to the kitchen counter, closer to the pantry. The moment of truth was near. Whoever was coming was almost there, and Lila knew they had only one chance to hide and survive. The house, once peaceful and familiar, had transformed into a trap. Shadows stretched across walls like fingers. The silence was sharp and heavy, and danger was near. Lila whispered one final thought to herself. "We will survive. We must survive." The tension in the air was thick enough to touch. Every second felt like a minute. Every sound could be the one that gave them away. And in that moment, Lila understood. This was only the beginning. The warning had come, and the terrifying reason for her colleague's fear was about to reveal itself. The house would never feel safe again. Lila crouched in the pantry, her hands trembling, her heart hammering so loudly she feared it might give them away. Her colleague, the black maid, sat beside her, her eyes wide with panic. The kitchen, once familiar and ordinary, now felt like a trap, every shadow hiding a threat, every sound a warning. Lila tried to calm her breathing, telling herself that staying quiet and alert was the only way to survive. She listened intently, trying to catch the faintest hint of movement outside the pantry door. Then came the sound that made her blood run cold, a low, deliberate voice from the kitchen. It was not shouting, but the words carried a dangerous weight. "I know you're here," the voice said slowly, each word measured. "Don't try to hide. It's useless." The tone was chilling, calm yet filled with menace. Lila felt her stomach tighten. Whoever it was, he was confident, experienced, and very dangerous. She realized that the situation was far more serious than she had feared. Her colleague whispered again, her voice shaking. This is why I ran, last time, hey." She could not finish the sentence. Lila waited, sensing the terror in her colleague's eyes. Then, in a trembling whisper, the maid explained. He punished anyone who disobeyed him, anyone who tried to stop him. He made them pay. I saw it with my own eyes. People were hurt badly. Lila's hands tightened around her colleagues. The story was horrifying, but she needed to understand. The black maid continued, her words rushed, almost desperate. He came to the village last year. He wanted revenge. He found someone he thought betrayed him, and he didn't care who got hurt. I barely escaped. I ran. I swore I would never go near him again. But now he's here, and he's looking for us. Lila felt a chill crawl over her. The fear she had felt earlier was nothing compared to this. This was not just a stranger in the house. It was a person who had caused real harm before, and he had returned, determined to finish what he started. Every second in the pantry felt longer, every noise outside the door louder. Lila's mind raced as she thought about their options. Escape seemed impossible. The back door had been left open, but if he was already inside, it was too risky. Hiding was temporary, and waiting for help could take too long. She realized that staying calm and thinking clearly was their only chance. Panic could get them caught in an instant. Suddenly, the footsteps in the kitchen stopped. Silence returned, but it was a heavy, dangerous silence. Lila held her breath, straining to hear anything. The low voice came again, this time closer, almost a whisper right outside the pantry. "I know you're hiding. Come out, and maybe I'll be lenient." The words were like ice against her skin. She could almost feel the malice behind them, the intent to scare, to control, to hurt. Her colleague buried her face in her hands, shaking. Lila leaned closer, whispering, "We have to be smart, quiet. We can get through this." She tried to sound calm, though inside, her own fear roared like a storm. She thought about all the stories she had heard about people facing danger, and how courage sometimes made the difference between life and death. She could not let fear paralyze her, not now, not when the threat was real and close. The black maid looked up, her eyes filled with desperate trust. "Do you think we can survive?" she asked in a small, broken voice. Lila nodded, gripping her hand. "Yes," she whispered. "We must. We will. Just stay with me, stay quiet, and we will get through this." The determination in her voice gave her colleague a glimmer of hope, though the fear did not fade. Outside the pantry, the intruder moved with deliberate steps, circling the kitchen. Layla could hear the soft scrape of shoes against the tiles, the occasional cough, the slow drag of an unseen weight. He was searching, and he was patient. He knew what he wanted and was willing to wait for it. The realization made Layla's blood run cold. This was not a simple threat. This was a hunter, and they were the prey. Suddenly, a sound came from upstairs, a faint creak of a floorboard, almost imperceptible. The intruder paused, listening. Lila realized it was a small advantage, a chance to act. They had to move before he discovered them completely. She whispered urgently to her colleague, "We have to go now." Quietly, "Follow me." She opened the pantry door a tiny crack and peered out. The intruder was looking the other way. Their chance had come. They moved slowly, step by careful step, along the edge of the kitchen. Lila guided her colleague, her mind focused on every detail, the shadows, the furniture, the faint sunlight. One wrong move could alert him. They edged toward the back of the kitchen, where a small door led to a storage room. It was tight, dark, and uncomfortable. but it could hide them until help arrived. As they slipped through the door, Leila whispered again, "We are almost safe. Just a little further." Her colleague nodded, trembling but moving as Leila guided her. The tension was unbearable, but Leila's determination never faltered. She knew the intruder could return at any moment, but for now, they were hidden, and that was enough. Inside the storage room, they crouched together, hearts pounding. The black maid finally spoke, her voice small but clear. I never thought he would come here. I thought I was safe, but he is relentless." Leila squeezed her hand, offering comfort in the only way she could. The terrifying reason for their fear was clear. This was not a simple danger. It was a personal threat, deliberate and cruel. And in that dark, quiet room, Leila realized that surviving today would take more than luck. It would take courage, quick thinking, and an unbreakable will. The terrifying reason for her colleague's fear had been revealed, and it was more dangerous than anything Leila had ever faced. Leila's mind raced as she crouched in the small storage room with her colleague. The intruder's presence in the house was no longer just a threat. They were trapped together, with danger so close it felt as if it could reach out and touch them. Her hands were steady only because her fear was pushed deep down, replaced by a sharp focus. There was no time to panic. Every second counted. Every movement could mean the difference between safety and disaster. "Listen carefully," Leila whispered, her voice low but firm. Her colleague nodded, swallowing hard. Leila knew she had to act quickly, but she also had to be smart. She scanned the room with her eyes, looking for anything that could help them. There were a few boxes stacked against the wall, some cleaning supplies, and a narrow window that led to the back of the house. It was small, but it could be their escape if they could get to it without being seen. The first step was to make sure the intruder did not know exactly where they were hiding. Leila motioned to her colleague to stay as quiet as possible. "No noise," she said firmly. "Not a sound. He is looking for us, and we cannot let him find us yet." Her colleague's breathing was shaky, but she nodded. Leila felt the tension in the room tighten like a rope around their chests. Every second, every creak of the house could betray their position. Outside the storage room, the intruder was moving carefully through the kitchen. Leila could hear each step, slow and deliberate. His movements were methodical, almost like a predator circling its prey. Leila's heart pounded, but her mind worked rapidly. She had to plan their escape before he reached them. She whispered to her colleague, "We will move when he turns his back. We must be fast and silent, understand?" Her colleague nodded again, gripping her on tightly for courage. Leila peeked through a small gap in the storage room door. The intruder had not yet moved toward the back of the house. His attention seemed focused on the living room and the hallway beyond. This was their chance. Leila motioned for her colleague to follow closely behind as she slipped out of the storage room, moving along the edge of the kitchen wall. Their steps were careful, calculated, almost invisible against the shadows. They reached the small window at the back of the house. It was narrow and old, but it could fit a person if they moved carefully. Leila pressed her hand against her colleague's back, guiding her. "First you, then me," she whispered. Her colleague hesitated for a moment, glancing nervously toward the kitchen. Leila gave her an encouraging nod. "You can do it." "We have to try." Slowly, the black maid slid through the window, one careful movement at a time, until she was outside in the garden. Leila followed next. She felt the old wood of the window frame creak slightly under her weight, but it held. She jumped down quietly, landing on the soft grass. The cool air of the garden hit her face, a sharp contrast to the tense heat of the house. For a brief moment, she allowed herself to breathe. They were outside, but the intruder was still inside, searching. They were not safe yet. Leila led her colleague along the side of the house, keeping to the shadows. They moved quickly, but silently, avoiding any loose stones or dry branches that might make noise. The garden was large, with tall hedges and trees, perfect for hiding. Leela's mind worked fast, calculating the safest path to reach the street without being seen. The intruder could emerge at any moment, and they had to be ready to run. Suddenly, a noise came from the back door. The intruder had discovered the empty kitchen. Leila froze for a heartbeat, pressing her colleague against the hedge. They stayed completely still, holding their breath as the door swung open. The intruder stepped out, his eyes scanning the garden, looking for any sign of movement. Leila could feel the danger pressing down on them. He was closer than ever, and one wrong step could give them away. Thinking quickly, Leila noticed a narrow path between two hedges that led to the side street. It was covered in shadows, hidden from view. "This way," she whispered. Together, they slipped along the path, careful to stay low and silent. Every step felt heavy with tension, but their determination kept them moving. Leila focused on keeping her colleague calm, whispering encouragement and holding her hand tightly. As they reached the street, the distant sound of traffic gave Leila a sense of relief. They were out of the immediate danger zone, though she knew the intruder could still follow them. The black maid finally breathed more easily, her terror slowly giving way to gratitude and hope. "Thank you. I don't know what I would have done without you," she said softly. Leila smiled faintly, knowing the danger was not over, but that they had survived the most immediate threat. They continued moving along the street, putting distance between themselves and the house. Leila kept her eyes on their surroundings, alert for any sign that the intruder might be following. The cool evening air helped them recover from the fear that had gripped them moments before. She realized that quick thinking and calm action had saved their lives. Courage and focus were their only weapons in the face of real danger. Finally, they reached a safe location, a small, well-lit shop that was still open. Leila knocked on the door, and the shopkeeper let them in, surprised but sympathetic. They explained briefly that they needed help and protection. For the first time since the afternoon had begun, Leila allowed herself to relax. They had survived the immediate danger, and now the next step was to alert the authorities and ensure that the intruder could not harm anyone again. Leila knew the events of the day would stay with her forever. She had faced fear like she had never imagined, acted quickly, and protected someone in grave danger. She realized that courage was not the absence of fear, but the ability to act despite it. And in that quiet moment of relief, she understood that her quick thinking and determination had made all the difference. Leila and her colleague huddled inside the small, brightly lit shop, trying to calm their racing hearts. The contrast between the warmth and safety of the shop and the darkness of the house they had just escaped felt almost unreal. For the first time since the terror began, Leila allowed herself to breathe more freely. But deep down, she knew the danger was not completely gone. The intruder was still inside the house, and they needed help, professional help, to make sure he could not hurt anyone else. The shopkeeper, a kind middle-aged man with a soft voice, noticed the fear in their eyes. "Are you two all right?" he asked gently, concern etched on his face. Leila shook her head, tears welling in her eyes. "No, not really," she whispered. He's dangerous. He was in the house and we barely got out." Her voice trembled. The black maid clutched her hand tightly, still shivering from the fear and adrenaline. Without wasting time, Leila explained what had happened. She described the intruder's movements, his voice, and the terrifying reason her colleague had run. She spoke quickly, trying to make every detail clear while keeping her composure. The shopkeeper listened carefully, nodding with understanding. "You did the right thing coming here," he said firmly. "Now we call the authorities. They will take care of him." Leila felt a small wave of relief at those words. Help was coming. She could not stop shaking, but the knowledge that the danger would soon be under control gave her a glimmer of hope. She and her colleague waited, sitting on a small wooden bench in the corner of the shop. The black maid's hands still trembled as she held onto Leila's arm. I thought he would find us," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Lila squeezed her hand reassuringly. "We are safe now. He won't hurt us anymore." Minutes later, the sound of sirens approached. Lila felt her heart jump again, but this time it was not fear, it was relief. The authorities had arrived. A team of police officers stepped into the shop, their presence calm but authoritative. Lila explained the situation to them quickly, pointing toward the house where the intruder was hiding. The officers nodded, listening with seriousness and understanding. They assured her and her colleague that everything would be handled and no one would be harmed. One of the officers asked the black maid to give a detailed description of the intruder. She hesitated at first, but with Lila's support, she managed to describe him carefully, including his movements, his voice, and the way he had searched the house. Lila added information about the back door, the footprints, and the small window they had used to escape. The officers took notes efficiently, their calm confidence making Lila feel more secure. Soon, a few officers returned to the house to search for the intruder. Layla and her colleague were taken to a safe room nearby, away from the house. They could see the flashing lights of police vehicles from the window, a reassuring sign that help was actively at work. Leela felt a mix of relief and relief that they were safe, but worry for anyone else who might have been in danger. She knew they had been lucky, and she silently thanked her instincts for guiding her through the terrifying moments earlier. While waiting, the black maid began to calm down. Lila handed her a glass of water and offered comforting words. "We did it," she whispered. "We made it through. You stayed with me, and we stayed calm. That's why we are safe." Her colleague nodded slowly, tears streaming down her cheeks. I don't know what I would have done without you," she said softly. Leela smiled gently, though her own emotions were still raw. She felt proud not of herself alone, but of the way they had supported each other and stayed alive. After what felt like hours, the police returned, bringing the intruder in handcuffs. Leela watched as he was taken away, feeling a heavy weight lift from her shoulders. Relief washed over her, mixed with a sense of triumph. The danger that had filled the house, that had made every shadow threatening and every sound frightening, was gone. They were safe. The authorities assured them that the intruder would be questioned and the situation would be resolved so no one else would be harmed. Finally, Leela and her colleague were able to leave the safe room and return to a quiet, secure place. The fear that had gripped them all afternoon slowly began to fade. Leela could feel her muscles relax for the first time in hours. The house that had once seemed so threatening now felt like just a building again, harmless without the presence of danger. Her colleague rested her head on Lila's shoulder, exhausted but relieved. In that moment, Leela realized the true power of courage, quick thinking, and staying calm under pressure. They had faced a real threat, someone dangerous and determined, but they had survived. They had acted together, guided by instinct, trust, and bravery. And that was more important than anything else. As they walked away from the house later, escorted by the police to ensure their safety, Lila felt a mix of emotions, relief, pride, and a quiet gratitude. She had faced one of the scariest moments of her life, and yet she had protected someone else. She understood that courage was not about being fearless, it was about acting even when fear was present. For the first time since the terrifying day began, Lila allowed herself to smile, knowing that they were truly safe. The ordeal had tested them in ways they could never forget, but it had also shown them the strength they carried inside. And as they left the shadows of the house behind, Lila knew that this moment of rescue and relief would stay with her forever. A reminder of bravery, quick thinking, and the power of hope in the darkest times. After the intruder had been taken away by the authorities, Lila and her colleague finally returned to a quiet home, one that no longer felt threatening but safe and ordinary. The house, which had earlier seemed like a place of shadows and danger, now looked calm, even peaceful. Sunlight filtered through the windows, lighting up the familiar rooms. Layla took a deep breath, letting the warmth of the sun wash away some of the tension that had gripped her all afternoon. She felt a mixture of relief, exhaustion, and something deeper, an understanding of what courage and responsibility truly meant. Her colleague, the black maid, sat beside her on the sofa, still trembling slightly but calmer than before. I can't believe we made it," she whispered, her voice soft, almost in disbelief. Lila nodded, feeling the weight of the day in her shoulders. "We did," she said quietly. "It was scary, but we were careful. We stayed calm. That's what helped us survive." The black maid looked at her with gratitude, her eyes reflecting the mixture of fear, relief, and admiration she felt for Lila's quick thinking. Lila walked through the house slowly, looking at each room with a new perspective. She noticed things she had never paid attention to before, the way the sunlight touched the wooden floors, the sound of birds outside the window, the fresh smell of the cleaned rooms. These small, ordinary details seemed beautiful in a way they hadn't before. After the terror of earlier, life itself felt precious, fragile, and important. Every ordinary sound and sight reminded her that she and her colleague were alive and that survival was worth appreciating. As she reflected, Lila thought about the events that had unfolded. She realized how quickly fear could take hold, how easily panic could overwhelm a person, and how important it was to remain calm under pressure. The intruder had been dangerous, relentless, and terrifying, but it was her ability to think clearly, to plan carefully, and to act decisively that had saved them. Courage, she understood, was not about not feeling fear, it was about taking action despite fear, about protecting others even when your own heart is shaking. Her colleague spoke again, breaking the quiet. I was so scared," she admitted, her voice small. "I didn't think anyone could help me, but you. You saved me." Lila smiled softly, placing her hand over her colleague's. "We saved each other," she said. "I couldn't have done it alone. You trusted me, and I trusted you. That's why we made it through." The two women sat together in silence for a while, thinking about how much they had endured. They had faced fear that felt impossible to overcome, and yet they had survived. Later, Lila spoke with the family who had hired them, explaining everything that had happened. They were shocked but grateful, and they praised Lila for her bravery and quick thinking. It was a reminder that her actions mattered not just to herself, but to others who depended on her. That day, she learned an important lesson. Even in ordinary lives, extraordinary courage can be found, and even small decisions, moving quietly, thinking carefully, acting decisively, can make the difference between safety and danger. As the day came to a close, Lila thought about the fear she had felt and how it had changed her. Fear had made her alert, careful, and determined. It had forced her to trust her instincts and take responsibility for someone else's safety. She realized that moments of terror could teach people important lessons about themselves, lessons about courage, resilience, and compassion. And although she hoped never to face such danger again, she knew she had grown stronger because of it. Her colleague, too, had changed. The black maid had faced her own fear and survived, guided by Lila's calm and courage. She now understood the value of teamwork, trust, and staying composed in the most dangerous moments. They had been frightened, yes, but they had also discovered strength they did not know they possessed. And that knowledge, Lila realized, would stay with them forever. Before leaving the house that evening, Lila paused at the doorway, looking back at the rooms that had once held terror. She felt a strange mix of relief and gratitude. The house had been a challenge, a test of courage and presence of mind, but now it was peaceful again. Life had returned to its ordinary rhythm, but the lessons of the day were unforgettable. Lila understood that courage was quiet, steady, and persistent. It did not roar, it acted, even in the face of overwhelming fear. As she walked home with her colleague, the sun dipping low in the sky, Lila reflected on everything she had learned. Fear, she realized, was natural, but it could be controlled. Danger could be survived if one remained alert and focused. And most importantly, protecting others, standing firm in the face of fear, and trusting oneself, These were the things that made a person truly brave. The events of the day would stay with Lila forever, but they had left her stronger, wiser, and more confident. She understood that life could be unpredictable and terrifying, but with courage, determination, and care for others, it was possible to face even the darkest moments and emerge safely. That afternoon, once filled with terror, had become a story of bravery, trust, and survival, a story that would remind her for the rest of her life that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. And as the sun disappeared behind the horizon, casting a warm glow over the town, Lila walked forward, ready to face whatever life had in store, carrying with her the lessons, the courage, and the strength that had been forged in the most frightening hours of her life.